Well, it looks like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is just about ready to make headlines with his running mate choice. He is ready to announce who his VP will be, and according to reporting, it's not any of the usual suspects. Remember, we had speculated about Aaron Rodgers and Jesse Ventura, but according to reports, he will announce Nicole Shanahan, who is a California attorney who paid for the candidate's Super Bowl ad. You probably remember that one. Aaron Rodgers, as I just said, had been touted last week as a top contender, but reports say that RFK Jr.'s donors were not pleased with him. Now, Shanahan does not technically have any political experience. However, she is known to have donated very large sums of money to Democratic candidates. She was also once married to Google co-founder Sergey Brin, and the marriage ended after she was accused of having an affair with tech billionaire Elon Musk that both denied very strongly. So what does she bring to RFK Jr.'s campaign? Let's get into it. So this was not, I think, a name that anyone had necessarily... You didn't even let me finish talking.
Sorry, go ahead, Robby.
Yeah, she has a lot of money. She was previously married to Sergey Brin, who has a lot of money. She's a active donor to Democratic causes in the past, was a big fan of Musk when he was still in the Democratic fold, and has rejoined him and is in terms of offering support and potentially financial support. So, and she was the mastermind behind the Super Bowl ad. So this does give him access to a lot more money, even though I don't think she was a household name before this. She is someone who was in the news previously because Elon actually, I believe, tweeted about it at the time, saying they did not have an affair. They'd only met her a few times. She was a lovely woman, but those reports were not true. Her marriage to Sergey Brin did end, however.
Look, he has been accused of running a campaign that is too online, that's too invested in what it means to get buy-in from kind of the Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, even like Bill Maher style community, as opposed, not that he supports him, as opposed to doing the more traditional on the ground political work that tends to have more of a close relationship to actually having good electoral outcomes, as opposed to just having interest in the polls. And when there was speculation about someone like Jesse Ventura being involved, I had questions about what that meant about Jesse Ventura's politics, as someone who once said that he would run as a Green Party candidate. But for RFK Jr., it's obvious to see what having the support of a very popular person who was an outsider candidate but that has served in office could lend to his ticket, especially if you're concerned that with all of these candidates being older, including RFK Jr., obviously he's younger than Biden, but none of them are spring chickens here, there is an argument that you really need to have a VP who can
although Jesse Ventura is old as well.
Yeah, but it's a backup. It's a spare regardless of what something happens to the initial quantity.
I think he's older than RFK Jr.
RFK Jr. is 70, I believe. Yeah. So, but here's the question. 72. If you're not having a VP that's giving you kind of credibility as someone who's never themselves held elected office, as RFK Jr. hasn't, if you're not getting a VP on the basis that they represent or did represent a state and it will help you juice up your numbers in a particular part of the country, if you're not picking a VP on any of the kind of traditional axes that are supposed to boost your campaign, what are you doing here? And is this basically an illustration that this is a kind of a vanity campaign that's funded by a small number of millionaire and billionaire donors that's not actually going to be especially beholden to the people's interest because it's not reliant on the people's dollars or support to keep going?
Well, it's not just a vanity campaign. I mean, he's polling in the double digits at 20%. There is actual interest in his candidacy that I don't think can be denied, which doesn't speak to whether this is a good choice or not. I think someone with some political experience would have been a good idea. As you said, this unlocks a whole lot of money, which helps for advertising and his quest to get on the ballot in all 50 states and all of that. Important. So yeah, it is what it is. Also wanted to comment on, I know this, or go ahead.
Just before you move away from the money point, remember Michael Bloomberg was able to buy himself onto a presidential debate stage in 2020. He was able to use his money to run enough ads, particularly in southern states where it's cheaper to run ads, and get himself a place on that debate stage. Now, once he got there and started opening his mouth, it didn't fare very well for him. I think the only victory he had was in some place like Guam.
Yeah, well, I don't think anyone
But you can launch your campaign. And I'm not saying there isn't organic interest in RFK Jr. There obviously is, and we've been covering it on the show. And I don't mean to diminish that in the least.
There was no organic interest in Bloomberg.
And I don't mean to diminish that in the least. But I'm not the one. Remember, we're talking about a choice that RFK has made right now. He hasn't made a choice to pick a candidate that is aligned with one of the areas of policy interest that has attracted him that attention. He didn't pick Aaron Rodgers, the COVID candidate. You know, he didn't pick an independent like Jesse Ventura. He didn't even pick like a moderate Republican to reassure the Republican base that he is in fact a Republican and not a Democrat. He didn't pick a Democrat to assure the Democrats in the other direction. So this is a person whose only value, obviously, I'm sure she's a lovely woman. I'm not talking about her humanity here, but her only value to this campaign is money. When you characterized her as being the mastermind behind the Super Bowl ad, no, she was the pocketbook. She paid $4 million out of her own purse for this. And so, given her past history of donations, which have been all over the map, she apparently donated to Marianne Williamson at one point, to Pete Buttigieg at one point. What are her politics and what are her goals? And what does it mean that someone who just gave you money is not just behind the scenes, but is so influential that they managed to get themselves side by side with you on the actual ticket?
Yeah, I think we need to hear a lot more from her about her views and what her area of expertise was. And yeah, absolutely. I'm interested to learning more about her. I think probably many of our viewers, including those who have taken an interest in RFK Jr.'s candidacy, will want to hear more as well. Speaking of Aaron Rodgers having fallen out of the running, this kind of, I think, all happened after you and I were done for the week last week, so we didn't get to talk about that. CNN reporting on him. I don't know if you saw any of this. This really hurt his potential candidacy, I think, for the VP. A CNN reporter claimed, and this aired on Jake Tapper's show, that 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, he had said something Sandy Hook truthy.
Oh,
that
dear.
kind of thing. But it was never reported at the time. This is a CNN reporter said that he said this to her 10 years ago. And then there was an additional anonymous corroborator who was not, and that was all. And they ran with it. And Aaron Rodgers denied it. He said he doesn't believe in any Sandy Hook conspiracy theories, that he has done fundraisers, including at the time, for Sandy Hook victims, and that this was a totally unfair smear job. And a lot of people were wondering, well, if he had, like, he wasn't a political necessarily person at the time, but he was still a pretty famous person. And if there was a CNN reporter who overheard this, why was there no reporting on it at the time? Why is it just coming out now? And I think that was a valid point.
I mean, it's interesting. I could, look, he told a CNN reporter, I don't think that everything a famous person tells you or I, if we don't reveal it immediately, means it wasn't true, right? The fact that you told, that you can have the reporter might have a personal relationship with him. You can think that things don't matter when a football player says or believes something versus when a president who has the real policy power says or believes something. I mean, this was the argument that was used with respect to Tara Reid, for example, and other people who didn't come forward against Trump or Biden or whomever until they started running for office. Why now? And I think the answer that many of those women have given is, well, when they weren't in office and it was just a personal issue, I didn't feel like facing public scrutiny over making this kind of an allegation. When someone goes from being a senator to being a president, or someone goes from being a football player to being potentially a vice president, certain aspects of their past, certain past statements or behaviors, I do think become more relevant. Now, I can see it cutting the other way, but I'm reading the reporting now. Apparently, allegedly, he told two people, including the CNN reporter. It's not clear who the other person is. Regardless, do you believe that this was why he was no longer in the running to be the VP?
I think this definitely hurt him. I think it absolutely hurt him. And look, I hear what you're saying, but especially for just, again, this wasn't a sexual assault accusation, for something he may have said that was kind of crazy if he said it that many years ago. I mean, how do you even effectively rebut that? Like, you have to recall exactly what you said. Well, did I give that impression to you and you misheard me? Like, we're trying to remember a conversation that he had. It seems kind of unfair to me, without a recording or without there was no story at the time. There is some of his actual behavior at the time contradicts that. Again, doing events with Sandy Hook victims that he apparently didn't think were crisis actors or whatever, or families of the victims. So I don't know. I was very put off by it, as were, I think, a lot of people who are fans of Aaron Rodgers, but it was interesting.
Interesting. Well, look, let us know what you think of the pick that was, in fact, chosen. I'm really curious to read your response to the news.
Oh, and by the way, RFK Jr. is going to be on Cuomo's show on News Nation tonight, so it'll be interesting to see if he does unveil Nicole Shanahan. More Rising right after this.